Okay, everybody, welcome. It's Alan Davidson, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you this evening. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Evolutionary Enlightenment, Amazing States to Permanent Traits. And I am your host this evening. Let me see. Get the full screen here for you. And here we go. So I just want to welcome everyone and sort of, position you for what you're in store for in the next 90 minutes. And, you're here. My audience, the people that I love to speak to, are people who are on a spiritual path. They're interested in the absolute best human being that you can be. In the Eastern tradition, that's often called enlightenment, but in the Western tradition, it's self-actualization, self-realization. Um, and also because I tend to work with in the marketing world, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and particularly people who um, they have their own business. They're coaches, they're massage therapists, they're dance teachers, they're yoga instructors, and they have a business where they're able to, one, pursue and evolve and develop themselves as human beings, but they love sharing those gifts and helping other people to wake up and to live healthier, happier, more productive lives. So welcome to you. This online training is for you if you're in that place in your life and you might have done everything right, you might have read all the right books, but there's still something that's like a splinter in your mind, and that you know that there's something more for you that you have been seeking, whether it's for years and years, 30 plus years like I have, or, you're relatively new. As Margaret said, she's only been on her seeking spiritual path for 7 years when we spoke the other night. If you're just if you're in that place where you're ready to kick it up, or even importantly, where you feel stuck. I work with people who have been on a spiritual path often for 20 plus years, whether that's as a regular rigorous meditation program or a martial arts program or yoga practitioner, whatever that is, whatever spiritual path that you're on, but you sort of feel stuck. You've reached a plateau and haven't quite figured out how to take it to the next level. And also, if you feel burnout, I work with a lot of sort of activists, people who are deeply concerned about the environment or human rights, the state of the world that we're in, the state of education, or just the state of, human beings in the world we live in. And they're very active. They're politically active, economically activist, but there's that sense of the problems are so overwhelming and the world is so big, and there's just no way that little old me can actually make a dent and make a difference. And so there's a tendency for people that kind of get stuck in that perspective to start to feel burnout. And the work, this evolutionary enlightenment work that we're going to talk about this evening, is one way to sort of reconnect to your own source of power and aliveness and the infinite power of the universe, and let that nurture you and fuel you and help you. So if you're feeling any of those, then you're in the right place. Welcome. So one of the things that we're going to really dive into in the next 90 minutes is what is classic enlightenment, and what is evolutionary enlightenment, what are the important distinctions, and of course always in the sense of how does that serve you, how does that help you be a better human being, how does that be happier in your life, healthier in your life, wiser in your life, more skillful in your life. So we're going to play with some of those distinctions. And so some of the things that we're really going to dive into that I think are really important is the three-step prescription for evolutionary enlightenment that I have found in my own work. the 5 states of being that span the Grand Canyon of consciousness, and more importantly, how you can shift those fast and easy. The 5 stages of enlightenment. And I want to tell you, my friend Joe Hirsch, who is a good friend and a student and an ally of mine, and he has been on his own spiritual journey for 30 plus years, he and his wife both. And the 5 stages of enlightenment, Joe said that one single thing completely transformed his life and his spiritual life and his spiritual practice. So I really encourage you to hang out and stay for that. We're going to cover your five vital intelligences and how you can use them to access these enlightened states. And we're going to talk about resistance, the part of you that really keeps you from doing the work that you want to do and doing the work that you need to really move forward. And a lot of that resistance has been around since you were a baby or a child, and certainly since you were a young adult. And we're going to talk about those this evening and ways that you can overcome them in a very loving and gentle and holistic way that helps them actually grow and heal and evolve with you. So evolutionary enlightenment is really about transcending and including and building on everything that you've done to get to this point in your life. So it's not about shedding skin, with the metaphor of a snake, or killing the ego or anything like that. And then we're going to talk about the fast and easy evolutionary shift that makes it possible for you to really, really grow at exponential rates. And I just want to say, I'm not going to be looking at the question box until the end of the program, but if you've got questions as we go through, please don't hesitate to enter them. And at the very end of the program, we're definitely going to be doing some Q&A, and I'll answer as many questions as I can. But just a little bit about who am I. I'm the author of Body Brilliance, the #1 health and wellness bestseller. It reached, the week it came out, it reached #7, I think, on Barnes & Noble's top 100 books. And it also went on to win 2 Book of the Year awards. I'm the midwife of this weird meditation called Enlightened Tapping, which many of you on the webinar had the chance to experience a few days ago. If you haven't, it's an extraordinary, we'll make sure you have the link to the replay so that you can experience it. I wanted you guys to have a sense of, to know that what I'm talking about by enlightenment, but as an experience that you had in your own self, your own personal awareness. So if you haven't seen that yet, I'll make sure you get the link so that you can go back and do the tapping and have the experience, and you can have that. But before, well, let me just say also, I'm at a really exciting place in my life. Last year, I was invited to join the Center for Integral Wisdom. And that is not only a think tank, but it's an activist tank of people who are wanting to change the source code of reality and change the source code of humanity. And some of the people working on the board with me are, of course, Ken Wilber, who's the founder of Integral Theory, Mark Gaffney, who's one of the top experts on the Kabbalah, and he actually is the person who sort of is responsible for the unique self theory that we're going to include tonight. John Gray, Jack Canfield, Barbara Marx Hubbard, Michael Beckwith, Mark Devine, a Navy SEAL commander who's doing a tremendous work around embodying extraordinary states of awareness. So that, I find myself in a really, really incredible group of people, and I am so humble and so awed to even consider these great teachers my peer. And unfortunately for me, I get to be the voice of sort of reason and say, it's all great to have this as a wonderful theory, but how do we make it alive in our bodies? How do we make it alive in our bones? How do we live this work with every breath and every gesture? And so that's what I mean by amazing traits to permanent, from amazing states to permanent traits. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit as well. But things were always not so fabulous for me. I moved to Houston in 1980 to become bartender to the fabulous. And if you had a chance to read the Huffington Post article about Enlightened Tapping, you know that at one time I was a very well-known female impersonator, and I was also a methamphetamine junkie. I was an IV drug user. And I remember just the incredible pain and agony, and shooting a meth for me was the only way that I knew to handle the kind of psychic pain and emotional pain and anguish that I was in, from my life. And that's a pretty extreme example, and maybe a few of you on the call have experienced that, but most of you haven't. But are there other ways that you've played Russian roulette with your life, or you've taken risk with your own life, or your health, that maybe aren't as extreme as being an IV drug user? But I finally did get clean and sober in the late 80s. And I remember having to decide, do you want to make short-term plans for your life, or do you want to make long-term plans for your life? Because we knew by then that HIV and AIDS was caused by a virus. And I just assumed that I would die a very painful and lonely death because I had shared needles with men who had already died from AIDS. And so once I got clean and sober, I happened to live with a medical doctor who was an HIV expert. And he just kept saying, Alan, I think you're negative. You're just so healthy. So after hearing that for about 6 months over and over, Alan, I think you just might be negative. You're so healthy. I actually scheduled and went and got my first HIV test. And in those days, you went and gave blood, and it took 2 weeks for them to get the results back. Now today you can get the results back, I think, in about an hour or 90 minutes or something. But in those days, it was 2 weeks of wondering what would the doctor have to say. And I remember going back to the clinic and sitting in that uncomfortable chair and waiting and feeling the tension and the stress and the fear that was saturated in the walls of all the other people who had sat in those chairs waiting for the news that they may or may not die. And the counselor came and quickly took me back to his cubicle and promptly told me that I was HIV negative. And it was one of those moments where my body began to tingle. I began to hear an ocean wave rushing sound in my hearing. And it was almost like that counselor was at the rear end of a kaleidoscope or a telescope. And I was just in the sensations of my body and the incredible relief that swept over me as I learned the news that I was negative, and in the face of so much death that I had a chance to live. And I remember leaving the clinic that day, swearing, taking a vow to get my act together, even though I was already clean and sober, to really use the skills and the gifts and the talents that I'd been given to make a difference in my life and in the community that I lived in that was in so much suffering and with so much pain. And so the one thing that I quickly found, that was 25 years ago that I got clean and sober, and that I took that HIV test. And so actually it was 88. It was a little longer than that. I had a bit of a relapse 2 years after getting sober. So I have been sober now 25 plus years continuously. And the one thing that has made the most difference to me in my healing process is a body-centered meditation. And so that's why the body's so important to me, and meditation and this enlightenment journey is so important. So, if you've played Russian roulette with your health or your life in some way, form, or fashion, I'd appreciate if you would just enter that into the little question chat box and let me know that I'm not the only one here. Um, so I'd appreciate that. And let me just see what other people are saying here. So, yeah, lots and lots of other people have also had experiences where that you've played Russian roulette with your life. So thank you. I know I'm not alone. So anyway, so that's just a little bit about me, and I bring now to you, and even when I was partying, I was still looking for the spiritual solution. And I would say that journey really began in sort of 1977, but it began for earnest in the fall of 1983. And so I'm going to bring to you everything that I've got and that I've learned is sort of the pinnacle of what is available to you. Um, and give it to you in the next 75 minutes. And I promise you, I'm going to give you tools and skills that you can walk away with today that will help you. And then for those of you that are really genuinely interested, I'm going to make an invitation to you if you want to go deeper. Okay, so this is a question that I always ask that sort of guides my life. It's in service to what? And Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst from the late 1800s and well into the 1900s, who was a friend of Freud's, and they sort of together really put psychoanalysis on the map. But Jung, I consider myself sort of an avid student of Carl Jung, and he always asked the question, if you're about to make a choice, what is that choice in service to? Is it in service to your wholeness and well-being and your self-actualization? Or is it in service to your program? Is it in service to your fear? Is it in service to your complexes? Is the term he would use. And so I want tonight for all of us to collectively to sense that you have a rainbow, a kaleidoscope that is inside of you, that's buried in your DNA, it's in your soul print, it's in your bones, it's in your breath, it's in your mind, and it's buried at the very core of your being, and it's just waiting to get out. And so whether you use the metaphor of a butterfly or a bird or a peacock or the chakra system from infrared all the way to ultraviolet, whatever rainbow metaphor that you use is not important, but that you have a unique self, that in the 8 billion years of evolution, there is no soul and there's no body that is ever been exactly like you. And I call that the rainbow unique self. And we tapped on it, we worked with it. I introduced you to that part of yourself in the Google Hangout a few days ago with Margaret. And as I said, if you haven't watched that, then we'll get you the replay, because it's one thing to talk about these things, it's a whole nother to experience them. But what I'm going to talk about is how you get to have an amazing experience of, oh my God, I've never been more grounded. I've never felt more powerful. I'm on fire for my own soul purpose and my own passions in life. I feel so infinite, and yet I feel so present in the immediate moment. Whatever your experience is of that unique self, it's one thing to have it as a fleeting, flashing, amazing state, and then it goes away, and your old programming comes crashing back. The matrix comes crashing back to suck you back into your old ways of being. So how do we take those amazing states and turn them into permanent traits? So that is the essence of what we're doing here today. So here's my prescription for evolutionary enlightenment. So it's really very simple. It's wake up, it's grow up, and it's show up. And so our program tonight's divided into those three ways: ways to wake up, ways to grow up, which really is that pathway of amazing states. Wake up as amazing states, grow up as turning them into permanent traits, and then show up is how do you show up as your rainbow unique self, and really be the master and the conductor of your own life, and to contribute in this amazing evolutionary pathway that we're on right now. So let's look at wake up. And in classic enlightenment, waking up is the journey between your personal self or your separate self and your no self. And there are a lot of ways to talk about that, but no self is classically called samadhi or nirvana or satori. It is a complete transcendence and experience of your former self, your separate self. It seems to be that the way this world works is that that we come into this world and we believe we are separate from all that is. And really the journey of wholeness and healing is how do we then come back to that sense of wholeness. And the spiritual journey is really how do we transcend that painful, anxious, separated self, and then first experience what I'm calling the no self, the satori, samadhi, nirvana. Now there are two pathways to do that. The traditional classic awareness is a path of awareness to no self, and it is by working with the mind. Completely transcend your limited self and selfish perspectives, sensing beyond all borders and boundaries. It's a deep relief and relaxation into vast spaciousness, and it's also a laser-focused concentration. Now, the second path is devotion, and that's really through the heart, and that's for those of you that were with us the other night, that was the experience of the Divine Mother. The path of awareness was the stillness of pure being. And with the path of devotion, it's to sense, feel, and experience wholehearted, unconditional love, and to be held and to know that you belong in the cosmos, in the universe, and that you're held. And two of the great advantages or byproducts or benefits of either the path of awareness or the path of devotion is just an increase in creativity, in a sense of flow, and just joy and happiness. And then what is evolutionary enlightenment is to actually how do we go from that dance between the separate self and the no self, but then to actually come to that place of that pinnacle of the pyramid, which I call the rainbow unique self. And so you've already had a taste of that. And so let's talk about then the personal self to no self. What are the 5 states of being that span that Grand Canyon of consciousness? And the first one is waking. And so I want you see the personal self there on the left-hand side. If you were to imagine five different states that span between the personal self and the no self, on the far left is waking. That's your normal, everyday, I'm awake, I'm aware, I'm here, I'm shown up. And, it does contain your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, your desires, your longing, your achievements, your competence, all the aspects that we consider for our ego or our character or our personality, your normal waking state of being. So it's just, who you sense and experience yourself to be. And now we're going to start to walk our way towards the no self. And the second state of being is a little more subtle. Waking is, sort of in your body, for some of us anyway, but it's certainly being in your mind. Now, the second state of being is what's called the dream state. Now, you definitely, if you are aware and track your dreams at all, you notice that, okay, it's not quite this world, but basically you still are oriented to who you are in your life. There can be, some swings and dramatic changes, but you still have a self that you are, that you're oriented to. And, certainly from a Carl Jung psychoanalysis point of view, that dreaming is where your unconscious mind tries to bridge the gap with your conscious mind and to integrate your experiences and integrate the stress between who you're being in your everyday life and who your soul wants you to be. And now as we move to a third, more subtle state, that is called deep sleep. And this is the first place where you come to where you actually begin to transcend the self. In deep, deep sleep, you're beyond dreaming, and you are to that place where you have transcended your limitations, your separation, your desires, your preferences, your likes, your body, and you're in that state. And here's the irony and interesting thing is that we go to that place every single night when we actually enter into deep, deep delta sleep. And you notice that there's cycles that we go through in a night's sleep. But it's very, very important for you to reach this place of deep sleep, because that's where the body really gets its most deep rest. But it is that place of transcendence. You've transcended your sense of self. Now, here's the thing. Most of us do that every night, but we're completely unconscious about it. And so the evolutionary enlightenment process, the classic enlightenment process, is how do we start to become consciously aware of who we are in this deep sleep state of being. And then the fourth, more subtle stage even still, and we're almost to the complete no self, is what's often called the witness. And for those of you that have been meditating for any length of time or on your spiritual journey, you'll know that you often come to that witness place. And again, it's that sense of being transcendent. You have transcended yourself. There's no seeking, there's no grasping, there's no avoiding. There's just a welcoming and a presence to what is arising in the moment. Now, that can be the sensations of the body. It can be the sensations of the breath. It can be the stillness of the mind. But it really is just an openness and a beginning to sense and feel into infinity, and just being completely anchored and present and witnessing what's going on. There's no judgment. There's no need for anything to be different. There's no attachment to anything, to any state, no matter how fabulous and glorious a state of being it may be. It just is, I'm here, I'm present to whatever is arising in the moment, and I'm unshakable. And you start to cultivate a very important quality here, which is non-attachment. And that's really important in all aspects of the evolutionary consciousness, because we really are, as human beings, addicted to ourselves. We're addicted to our personalities, to our characters, to who we define. And so the more time that we can spend in this witness state and being non-attached, and develop and build that muscle of non-attachment, it helps us to loosen the grips of those parts that keep us addicted to our waking state of being. And just remember, I said this is a gentle and a loving and embracing path. And we're going to circle back in a few minutes and talk about very gentle, loving ways you can embrace those parts that are addicted to the self. And now the fifth state is full-on enlightenment, samadhi, satori, nirvana, oneness, the singularity, bliss. But it is a full-on transcendence of there is no self. or if there's any sense of self, it's a speck of light in all the created universes. And you are just so far beyond all of your normal time and space concerns and interests. And this is an extraordinary, beautiful place to experience. And whether it is the stillness of pure being, whether that's sort of Buddha mind, big mind, divine father quality, it's an extraordinary pleasure to sit in the witness and to sit in this place of enlightenment. One of the things that is so interesting as you look at this spectrum of personal self, the states of being from waking to dreaming to deep sleep to witness to enlightenment, how pleasure begins to take on different qualities. In the pleasure of being one with the universe, the pleasure of noticing, of witnessing, and the value and the pleasure of you valuing your own capacity to witness and to be one with the universe. And that's classic enlightenment. And as I said, there were two paths. One, the most well-known and charted path is indeed the path of awareness. And that's where many of the Hindu saints and sages, as well as the Buddhist saints and sages and the Taoists, the Chinese, the actual saints and sages all talk about, the transcendence of the body and the transcendence of the self and resting in the enlightened self. But that's where classic evolution ends. And for thousands of years, we actually believed that that was it. But if you look at the historical, particularly in the teachings of the Kabbalah and in Tibetan Buddhism and also in Zen Buddhism, there were certain teachers who began to hint and began to teach, there's more to it than just classical enlightenment. There's more to it than no self. There's more to it than classical Indian teaching in Vedanta. And that next stage is going to the pinnacle of the triangle, going to the peak of the pyramid, to that peak of consciousness, which is, as I've said, the rainbow unique self. So first, I want to give you some good news that there are time-tested techniques that you can use that will take you with practice, with rigorous practice, will give you an awakening to classic enlightenment. Any meditation, mindfulness meditation, which is the kind of American buzzword for Vipassana or insight meditation, TM, transcendental meditation, Kundalini meditation, any kind of meditative movement, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or martial arts, Kung Fu, Aikido, Taekwondo, those will, with practice, give you that sense of classic enlightenment. But also fasting or dancing. In the Native American tradition, in the Sioux tradition, they have the sun dance, which is an annual ceremony, 3-day ceremony where the warriors get up, both men and women, and they dance for 3 days in the sun. But in that dancing, they transcend the three-dimensional world of time and space. They transcend themselves and they go to that place of divine oneness and divine wisdom. Another example are the marathon monks in Japan. It's a monastery at the top of Mount Hiei, which is one of the mountains in Japan. And these monks take on a practice of running a marathon. And as that practice accelerates and they become stronger and wiser, they will actually commit to 40 days of running a marathon every day in straw sandals through the mountain, 26 miles every day. as part of their meditation and enlightenment practice. So there are lots and lots of different skills that will give you this sense. And there are lots of pathways where you can learn them. You know, you can go to YouTube and learn how to mindfully meditate. You can go to an easy introduction to transcendental meditation. You know, there are classes and teachers, so you have access to those. And now here are the pathways to wake up to the Divine Mother. In Buddhism, there's the metta meditation, which is always a meditation of compassion and holding and developing compassion for ourselves, for our enemies, especially our greatest teachers in the world, and all conscious beings in the world. I think about devotion and the pathways of devotion, particularly in India, and to the gods and goddesses of love and the pathway of love. Anytime you take on a practice of service, of being of service to another human being, and I mentioned a lot of the people that I work with, the activists for the environment, for human rights, for education, for democracy, you know, any activism that is taken on to be in service of the greater good or the highest universal good, you know, that is a pathway of devotion and a pathway of the Divine Mother. And for myself, one of the most powerful ways that I found is the work of Byron Katie. And if you know who she is, then you know the work is really the 4 questions and the turnaround that you ask yourself about your thoughts. But what I love is as you unravel those thoughts, Katie herself holds the space of amazing love and compassion. And if you've ever seen her in work, I believe she's one of the great sages and teachers of our time, and she is that embodiment of unconditional love. So, you know, again, you can go to YouTube and learn the work of Byron Katie, or you can get any of her books, particularly her first book, Loving What Is, and that's a pathway to the Divine Mother. But the only thing that I know that's going to help you wake up to your rainbow unique self, the peak of the consciousness, is Big Mind meditation, which was developed by my teacher, Genpo Roshi. He's an American Zen master, or the Enlightened Tapping process, which you experienced a few days ago. Okay, so that is wake up. So now I want to talk about growing up. And the process of enlightenment, it really is transforming those amazing states to permanent traits. How do you embody in your bones, in your breath, in your gestures, your everyday gestures, these amazing states of enlightenment and your unique self? And, you know, I love this metaphor of the butterfly, because, you know, the caterpillar is born, you know, it hatches from an egg, it consumes a tremendous amount of leaves and foliage, and then some instinct tells it to begin creating a cocoon of protection and safety. And so it envelops itself into a very strong and very powerful cocoon. And then at a certain point, there is this, again, this urge, you know, after the transformation is complete, to break through the cocoon and begin to emerge as a new being, as a new butterfly. And here's one of the interesting things. If you actually, you know, can see the butterfly, you know, trying to break through the cocoon, and you actually help it and rip open the cocoon, the strength that the butterfly needs to live and fly as a unique creature will never develop. So there's something about developing, following that urge to break through the cocoon and developing the strength to completely break through the cocoon is what allows it to live fully and completely as an exquisite insect of spectacular colors and grace and elegant beauty. And I love that metaphor because it's the parallel that each of us goes through. And I'm going to talk about resistance and the programming that we swim through in our lives more. But for the first part of our lives, we inherit, we take on, we're given a biography. We live somebody else's life that was handed to us, and we're told who we should be and how we should act and what we should do. And in the heart of that, there is also this impulse that knows that this is not my life. This is not my beautiful life. This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful way of being. It was given to me. And there's that impulse to be your own unique self. And it's that transition of shaking off all of that old programming and begin to write your own unique story, to begin to write your own autobiography. I also call it that pathway of when we are in service to the matrix, when we're in service to our program, and when we're in service to the biography, the story that our parents and our family and our tribe and our culture are telling us to live, we're constantly seeking external validation for ourself and our sense of self and our well-being. But the minute we begin to shift into writing our own story and living our own autobiography, that external search for validation and authority shifts, and we begin to become our own inner personal authority, spiritual authority, and we begin to grow and develop our own sense of authority. We begin to master who we are. And it's becoming and living that butterfly that is the transition to completely writing your autobiography or completely being your own internal master and not needing the matrix or not needing the old ways of validation and approval and appreciation that you needed as a younger person. So it's a beautiful metaphor, and that's really what I mean by growing up. But now how do we overlay what we've already said about waking up with what it means to grow up? So in classic spiritual enlightenment, first, it really was a form of spiritual intelligence or spiritual IQ. It was a spiritual unfolding and blossoming and awakening. But how many of you on this call have known about a spiritual teacher? Now, whether, but particularly in the Eastern Enlightenment traditions, but also in the Western psychology, Western spiritual teachers of any kind, of any faith and any denomination. How many of you have heard the stories of spiritual teachers who have sex with inappropriate, either their students or people from their congregation? They break the vows of their marriage, or God forbid, they're in like the scandal of the priest in the church. They're having inappropriate sexual relations with minors. So how many of you have heard of spiritual teachers that even though they might have amazing spiritual wisdom and clarity, they still have issues? They still have mommy issues or daddy issues, or they still, have anger issues, and they fly off, at things that just seem unrelated or inappropriate. Well, that's part of the shadow side of classic enlightenment. So it's one way to be spiritual enlightened. But one of the changes that we now know for evolutionary enlightenment is that it's not only a spiritual enlightenment, but it is a body, heart, mind, moral, and spiritual enlightenment combined. It's fully integrated. And so here are just the 5 essential things. I just want to just go over them very quickly for you of the body. And, the first physical intelligence, the most dense, is the body. It's your bones, it's your muscles, it's your connective tissue. And I would actually like you to to begin to understand the interplay between mind and body, mind and spirit. And if you're in a place that you can stand up right now, I invite you to stand up. I'm going to stand up here in my library with my boxer, my 89-pound boxer, beautiful white boy sleeping. And I want you to, if you can, extend your hands all the way out right and left so that you're sort of, standing, you know, um, with your arms out shoulder length. And now I just want you to twist all the way to the left, as far to the left as you can. You might even be, if you're really, really flexible, if you're a yoga teacher, then you're going to be able to look around all the way back to the far, right corner. But just however you can. And now I want you to come back to center. And I want you just to close your eyes, and with your intention and with your imagination and sort of with your energetic body, I want you to imagine now, your hands are still facing forward, your body's still facing forward, but in your imagination, your energetic body completely twists and turns towards the left. And that energetic body all the way, and that left hand goes all the way pointing into that far right back corner. And maybe even farther beyond. In your imagination, just see how flexible and supple you can be. And now I want you to come back to center. And now I want you to, with your physical body and with your breath and with your intention, now simply twist and turn and just go as far as you simply can. And just go comfortably. Don't stress, don't strain, but just twist and turn and just see. And I want you to notice, did you go farther the second time than you did the first time? Did that simple imaginary exercise in your mind's eye allow you to twist your body in a different way? And I'd like you just to enter into the question box, if you noticed a difference in the chat box. Did you notice a difference in that exercise? Yes, yes. Someone said went further. Yes, amazing. Yes, I could twist even further. Yes, yes. Okay, great. So your body has amazing capacity when you connect it with your imagination, your energetic body, and your mind. So I just wanted to give you an actual physical exercise. Now I want you to, now let's just balance the body because we're talking about body. So now twist all the way to the right and just notice how far you go. Nice, nice, easy, no straining. And now come back to center. And now imagine in your mind's eye your physical body stays facing forward, but now in your energy body, your kinesthetic body, you actually turn and twist and you reach all the way back around to that far left-hand back corner, or even further than that. And just savor the pleasure of your energy body stretching and moving. And with the breath, now your energy body comes back to center. And now let your physical body reaching back, your right hand reaching back towards that left back corner, and just notice and savor how far you can stretch. Beautiful, beautiful. And now with a breath, just come back to center, and you can come back to sitting or, whatever, and just being with us. And just, if you were able to even notice a difference, then enter something into the chat box for us. But particularly if maybe you notice more the second time, let us know and let us see that. Yes, somebody said, yes, I was able to twist even more. So great, Kat. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's just a taste of bringing your sensory self, your kinesthetic self, and how important it is. But I also want you to think about the stories of great athletes, particularly runners. People talk, particularly professional runners, dancers, who talk about the ballerina that'll say, oh, the dance danced itself. Or racers will say, oh, the race ran itself. They transcend their limited self. The physical body can actually be a portal to that transcendent state. Now, your emotional intelligence. Now, your emotion is your guts, the fluids in your body, your reproductive organs. So it's breath, digestion, sex, hormones, that part, as well as your emotions, from the full spectrum of your toxic emotions like chronic anger and grief and shame, fear, lusting, desiring, all the way across to the spectrum of your most whole and enlightened emotions like joy and ecstasy and, the highest levels of pleasure and love that you have. And so I want you to think in terms of emotional intelligence and those chronic emotions, those emotional states, whether you're, the self-critic is always feeding that sense of self-doubt, or you do have an anger problem and your temper is always creating difficulties for you in life, or you just live in a constant state of fear and anxiety, or you constantly go to, that sense of shame, or perhaps you're just depressed and you have a sense of grief. What would it be for you to actually develop positive, wholesome, holistic emotions? And I'm going to give you a real secret here. Here's a real simple tool that you can use right now for free that'll help you transform your emotions, and it's called a gratitude journal. Every night at the end of the day, write down, put a notebook, at the last place that you can write, or by your bedside or whatever, and write down 3 things that went well today. 3 good things that happened to you, and they can be small. They don't have to be big. They don't have to be, highly dramatic. But then, really sort of go back to the experience of it and really sense, what were you sensing in your body? What were the sensations and what were the emotions that felt so good that made it a valuable thing for you? And then ask your mind, say, I set my intention to anchor this in my body, heart, and mind. I anchor it into my being. And do that with the 3 things that you write down. And if you do that on a regular basis, it might take you 20 minutes to do, but it will completely transform your emotional self. And just think about emotional IQ. So think, again, is it a portal to that sense of transcendence and enlightenment and non-self? Certainly people who report that, actually when you have an orgasm, the French call the orgasm the little death, because there is that moment that however long, how many seconds your orgasm lasts, you are completely transcend yourself, your limitations, your fears. And that's why as a pleasure, so many people seek it over and over, because you transcend yourself in orgasm. But then with people who say practice, Tantra or erotic practices or Taoist erotic practices, there's a whole pathway of anchoring your attention and being able to sustain greater and greater levels of pleasure, and how you begin to really lose yourself in your sexual practice with your partner, looking into the eyes of your partner, surrendering to your partner. That's one example. But also think about, just for those of you that happen to have children, particularly mothers and fathers, of just loving your children. Perhaps you have a memory of seeing them in a crib or seeing them sleep, and just being so in love with them that you're transported out of yourself and you're transported out of time and space for a few moments. So that's an example. Mental intelligence, using your mind. And when I talk about mental IQ, it's not just an IQ test that you take. It really is in a harmony and balance of your unconscious, subconscious, conscious, and superconscious minds, and how they all connect together, and how you clear out particularly a lot of your old limiting beliefs and negative beliefs, and how you clear those out on a consistent and regular basis. But then knowing the path of awareness is a spiritual path, but it really is about training the mind to concentrate and focus and letting your awareness expand beyond what the normal mind can do. Moral IQ is really about, I mentioned being of service to each other. The only moral IQ that I really tend to for myself is, the golden rule. Uh, Love my neighbor like I love myself. Love you like I love myself. And base my choices on that. Does this choice cause harm to any conscious being? And if it does, then is there a wiser solution that I can make? And let me give you an example. I'm huge fan of elephants. I love elephants. And, and I've contributed money to elephants and rescuing elephants and giving them a great life, but also, trying to find places in Africa where they're safe and secure. Well, so it's one thing to create a protection where elephants are safe, but the reason that people poach them is because they don't have enough food to eat and they don't have enough money to live on. So if I am donating to elephants, but that solution only does not take care of the needs of the people, and I don't mean, greed and the people that are selling, ivory for, international traders for millions of dollars. I'm talking about the people who are simply trying to get enough to eat because they don't have it. If the solution does not address the fact that people don't have enough to eat and they don't have enough money to live on, so their basic needs for being aren't met, then it's an incomplete solution. And so how can I, from my own perspective, contribute to solutions where, one, the elephants are protected, but the people's basic needs to live and thrive and belong are also respected and served as well. So that's just an example of being of service and trying to be wiser and wiser in that choice. And then spiritual intelligence, so much of the spiritual life, religious life, meditative life talks about the transcendence of the self and the moving to the enlightened self. So they're not going to go say much more about that. Classic enlightenment is spiritual intelligence. Evolutionary enlightenment is how do you transcend, include, and integrate all aspects of your being, body, heart, mind, your choices and behaviors, and your spirit. Okay, so here's the 5 stages of enlightenment. That was the 5 states of consciousness. And then we move to how do we grow up, and how we begin to incorporate body, heart, mind, choice, and spirit, the embodiment process of growing up. But now here's the 5 stages of enlightenment. And I mentioned earlier that my friend Joe Hirsch said that this little piece of information, this little idea that I'm about to introduce to you is the one thing that transformed his spiritual practice and has transformed his life. So feel free, take notes, and the 5 stages of enlightenment. Now, the first stage, number 1, is a taste. It is an experience. Now, for those of you that have ever watched a sunset or looked at a fire or looked at your child sleeping and you've had a transcendent experience and you've gone to that place of, God, I'm one with the universe, then that's enough. If you completely transcended yourself at any time in your conscious life, that's a taste. But certainly if you've done it in any sort of spiritual practice, it's that place of, it's that first moment of waking up. And it sets the course, and it's like, oh, I am so much more than I was told I am. I am so much more than I believe myself to be. So how many of you have already experienced that? If you were on the tapping, the Enlightened Tapping with us the other day, and you tapped into the stillness of pure being, or you tapped into the Divine Mother, then you've had that taste, you've had that transcendent experience. But if you have at some point in your life, a lot of people that are probably on this webinar and on this path report they had them as children, but they had no way to understand or explain them. So if you've had that first wake up experience, just put it in the chat box for us and let us know. Yes, many times. Thank you. I remember my first transient experience was riding a horse. We happened to live on a property, and there was a 100-acre property, and it was in the hill country of West Texas, and it was really the only place in my life I felt safe as a young boy, as a teenage boy. And we had a limestone rock quarry that had a pond, and it was just, I would go back there and I would ride and I would just dream about getting away from small town Texas. But there were those precious moments when I transcended myself. And for me, that was that first taste. And then actually, I knew what was possible, and I somehow knew there was a spiritual solution. But all my years of seeking with drugs, occasionally LSD would give me, or, mushrooms or psilocybin or peyote would give me an experience of transcendence. But I always had to come back to myself. So, okay, so stage number 2, you've had an experience and you go on your spiritual path. I am, serious about my spiritual path, and that's where you take on a regular practice, whether it's meditation, whether it's breath work, whether it's becoming a body worker, whether it's becoming a NIA teacher, whether it's just going to yoga class or being a yoga teacher, whether it's being a dancer, or whether it's using even your exercise and lifting weights as a path to awareness and awakening. And that is the pathway of surrender and submission. Now, often there's a teacher involved in this. Now, whether it's one teacher like a guru, or it's a series of teachers that are just half a step ahead of you, that are still guiding you towards your own autobiography. Now, one of the problems with sort of the shadow sides of the guru path is that they don't teach you to be your own inner authority. They don't really teach you to write your own autobiography. It's still following the path of the teacher, following the path of the guru. So one thing we're seeing in evolutionary enlightenment is that you follow those teachers that are half a step ahead of you and that can really give you an opening and an experience and an awakening in your awareness, and also in your mind and in your heart. And then finally, through the trials and tribulations of spiritual practice, and the disappointments and the frustrations and the despair and the joys and the camaraderie and the community and all the excitement and the seeking, you finally break through and come to a place of great liberation. And that is where you have transcended the self. And it is pretty much a day in, day out, 24/7. Now, sometimes that can last months. Sometimes it can last weeks. Sometimes it can last days. And sometimes it lasts years. And it's really that ongoing, years process of being in that place of transcendence. And there's lots and lots of known spiritual biographies of people who've reached this place of great liberation. And in the East, a lot of those places say, I've transcended karma, I've transcended the self, I have left the cycle of enlightenment and reincarnation, I'm in this amazing place. But what we now know about evolutionary enlightenment is this is only half the way there. And I can tell you, the great teachers that I've known of and studied with, in the Hindu tradition, that were rageaholics and that were sleeping with young girls. They had amazing samadhi and and transmission of Shakti and energy. But they had their own shadows because it was only a spiritual enlightenment. It wasn't an emotional or a moral enlightenment that went with it. Or, a great, teacher from the Hindu tradition that I studied with, really my first meditation teacher. And he had so many mommy and daddy issues that, and he had great, great transmission of energy, but he was far from emotionally enlightened or morally enlightened. And it really, there's a way that great liberation becomes a way of avoiding our pain and avoiding our suffering and avoiding the sorrows that are still at the base of our psyche. Which brings us to the fourth stage of enlightenment, which is often called dark night of the soul, or sometimes it's called a fall from grace. And it's where we lose that sense of transcendence as a day in and day out. And I'm here to tell you, nobody in their right mind would lose this experience of great liberation and fall into the angst and the heartbreak and the soul breaking, soul crushing quality of, oh wow, I've lost my liberation. All the things I believed, all the things that I attached myself to are here. And I've lost it, and I'm nothing. And that's where the soul then has to begin to gather the pieces, if they're strong enough, if they can survive this excruciating, heartbreaking, soul-rendering experience, and begin to move into that fifth stage of enlightenment, which is the unique rainbow self. Now, in ancient Zen, classical Zen, it was called ordinary mind is the way. In the Kabbalah, it was, I don't know the Hebrew translation for it, but it was that soul that had been completely humbled by God. If you remember the story of Jonah and the whale, and God said to Jonah, you're going to be a spiritual teacher, and I want you to go to, these cities where it's very dangerous to be a teacher. And Jonah said, heck no, I'm not doing it, and went and caught a boat to get away, from God's command. And of course, then a storm comes and sweeps, and Jonah confesses to the people on the boat that, I'm running away from God, and I'm probably the reason that we're in the midst of this storm, and yet everything outside around us looks so beautiful and calm, and so you probably should just throw me overboard, because if you don't, we're all going to be killed. And they happily finally do that and throw him off, and he's swallowed by the whale. And the whale then takes him and keeps him for 3 days and swallows 360,000 fishes. So Jonah's in there very tight, very compressed, and all these fishes are being dissolved. And finally, he's like, after great excruciating pain and doubt and 3 days of transformation, he finally says, I'm ready. God, I will do your will. And the whale takes him to the shore and spits him out, and he's ready. And he goes on to be a great spiritual teacher in the Judaic tradition. And so that dark night of the soul is a deep preparation. And how often do people talk about that 3 days of that it takes for the transformation to happen to become your unique rainbow self? After the crucifixion of Christ, he rested for 3 days. In the Egyptian traditions, all the priests went in and they laid in a sarcophagus for 3 days where they were immersed in darkness. Over and over and over, we see that. So there's that transformation from all that when we finally surrender to the reality of what is, and we step into our unique rainbow selves, it really is that transition to, I am one with reality. I am in love with all that is. So before we move out of growing up, one of the important things that is so essential, because I talked about that impulse of a caterpillar to wrap itself in a cocoon, and then that impulse of a butterfly, once it's transformed, to break out of the cocoon and then to fight its way to its full strength and its full beauty and its full capacity, and then live its life in this elegant sense of beauty and wonder. We have that same impulse within us. But those of you on this call have probably witnessed those voices within yourselves that keep you from your magnificence, your own extraordinariness, that keep you from doing the practices that you know would help you complete the transformation, whether they're body practices like some sort of exercise, whether they're heart exercises, whether it's mind exercises like meditation, whether it's, moral practices, being of service to another human being, or really taking on the responsibility of loving another human being, or whether it's the spiritual practices of transforming your prana, your chi, your energy, and becoming your true rainbow body. How do we work with all that previous programming that keeps us from moving from biography to autobiography, that keeps us that keeps us in an external sense of validation and approval and appreciation, to moving to an internal validation and authority and a sense of appreciation and approval? How do we live into our own unique rainbow self? And it's just important to realize that your unconscious, your collective unconscious, your subconscious, all the programming that you got from the time you were in your mother's fetus to when you were a baby, when you were a child, you're a young adult, and an adult, until you were about, most people can have flashes, particularly in our generation. More people are having these younger. But if you haven't had that flash of, I am somebody that is totally different than my culture wants me to be, it starts to happen about 28 years old, 28 to 32 years old. If you like astrology, it's your Saturn return. That's the great awakening cycle. And it's to that age of about 56 to 62 that is that second cycle. So about 56, 62, if you haven't already done a lot of the clarification and healing work, then life's going to start really hitting you in the head going, you're missing the boat. So, we swim in this ocean of programming. And for those of you that were with us the other night, you know that the Enlightened Tapping process is built on the psychology of selves, or voice dialogue, and then the idea that we have many, many voices within our mind. And a lot of times those voices of the separate self are the inner critic, the wounded self, or the pain body, as Eckhart Tolle talks about it. It can be the pusher. It can, the archetype of your own mother and your own father, the imago of your mother, your father, the good father, the good mother, the bad mother, the bad father, the one who seeks the way, all the voices of the emotions, anger, fear, shame, grief. They are their own unique voices. All of them were developed as a part of your psyche and as a part of your consciousness. And they all have a job to do. And they keep you stuck because they're doing that job in the only way that they know how. Their job is to keep you safe, to keep you loved, and to make sure that you have a place to belong. Safety is first and foremost, safety in body, and then certainly safety in heart, safety in mind, safety in spirit. They want you loved and ideally loving, and ultimately they all want you to have an extraordinary place to belong. But because most of our childhoods were not so fabulous, a lot of us had very painful childhoods, but even the most loving household, there were shortcomings and there were difficulties, and there was limitings in beliefs and understandings of the way the world works and the way humans work and the way humanity works. So these voices developed as voices of protection. And so the art and science of evolutionary enlightenment is, how do you transform those voices that are stuck and keep you in resistance? How do you move them into allies that actually support you in waking up and growing up? And so there are a number of ways of doing that. The psychology of selves with Hal and Citra Stone do that. Big mind meditation. Enlightened Tapping does that. Margaret Lynch's work, working with the chakras and the inner voices and the shadow work. A lot of shadow work is around, beginning to at least heal these voices that are in so much pain and so much separation. So there's a lot of great body of work to do it. But Enlightened Tapping and Big Mind and certainly voice dialogue are really fast and easy ways to do it. Because when you are using the allies of the enlightened self and you are using the allies of the evolutionary rainbow unique self, then you are bringing energies online that are so far above and beyond your normal everyday thinking self. They help and facilitate the healing process extraordinary ways. So I just mentioned Big Mind, and that is my teacher, Genpo Roshi, the American Zen master. I definitely invite you to seek out his work. He's an extraordinary teacher. He's been my teacher since 2006, and so much of what I'm sharing with you, I learned with him and through him, and I stand on his shoulders in the Enlightened Tapping. And Enlightened Tapping is the evolutionary shift that makes classic enlightenment an essential but incomplete stage in your growing up and your showing up in your full life. Okay, so that's wake up and grow up. And now we're going to wrap this up tonight with show up. And, that's the third step in the evolutionary enlightenment process. So again, in service to what? Who is your rainbow unique self? And here are the things that I notice when I sit in that energy and as I'm embodying that energy of the rainbow unique self. There's that immediate sense of infinite. I am completely porous beyond my skin and bones and all borders and boundaries. I can sense into infinity and eternity, but I can also sense being immediately in the moment in a body. So most delicious pleasure and sensation to sense that. When I am in my unique self, I embody my soul purpose. I love all that is. I love everything that's arising in the moment. There's no complaints. There's no need to change anything. There's no need for anything to be different. And yet, I am being my best self, and I am in humble awe of the mystery. And here's the interesting thing. Part of my soul purpose is being humbly in awe of the mystery and listening for that evolutionary impulse to reveal itself to me of go here, do this. This is what's next for you. Now, part of the unique self is also transcending and including all the voices of the separate self, the inner critic, the pusher, the archetype for mother and father, the wounded self, the innocent and vulnerable child, the one who seeks the way, all the voices that have been very competent in my life, the one who mastered body work, the one who mastered internet marketing, the one who mastered this tapping meditation. Those are very competent parts of the ego and the separate self. And you all have your own competent and primary voices. Well, those all come back online when you are at the pinnacle and the peak of the pyramid, but they are wiser. They're more compassionate. They're in service to you and the universal highest good. And so the controller and the protector all of a sudden have skills and allies that help them do their job at the level of the separate self, but that also help them do the job at the enlightened self and at the unique rainbow self. So it's an amazing, but I just want to spend a few minutes and talk to you about soul purpose. And if you already know what your soul purpose is, would you enter that into the chat box, what you feel that your soul purpose, the reason you were born, what's in your DNA that you need to leave in this life before you die? What's the legacy that you want to leave for your family, for your community, for your tribe, for the world before we go on? Please post that in the chat box for me. And I'm going to share with you what I believe my soul purpose is. And I just see these comments are coming in so beautiful. Help others wake up, to love one another, to be a vessel for what others want to know. Beautiful. Keep posting those things in the chat box. Thank you. Let me see here. So, it's easy. I'm a firm believer. I like to know what's actually going on in the three-dimensional world. I read the New York Times every day, for better or for worse, just to know what's going on. And I tend to watch the 6 o'clock news. One, I think it's an exercise in compassion. But it's easy to think that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, because you look at the degradation of the environment, the pollution that we're doing to the land and the air and the water in our world. It's also looking at what's happening to what we call the commons, the beautiful forest, whether it's rainforest or pine forest in Siberia, or the Andes or the Appalachians, the loss of the ancient wisdom of our indigenous peoples, their languages, their customs, and their ways of knowing and being in the world. The chronic poverty in the world and the unequal distribution of wealth, and the way the economics seems to only serve, the top 10%, or the top 1%, as they sometimes say. Or certainly the lack of safety or education or democratic rights, whether it's for different races or cultures or ethnicities, whether it's for girls or for women, whether it's for gays, whether it's religious minorities. Wherever there's a sense of separation, and people are discriminated against it, and this is where we see man's inhumanity to man constantly come up. And that's where it's so important to be connected with the Divine Mother and her capacity to hold all that all that pain and all that suffering, and to give us the strength to be present to it and to act in the face of it. I remember surviving the AIDS epidemic, and there was a point then, and the situation for gays and gay rights was very, very different in the late 70s and the 80s. And when AIDS first came out, there were spiritual, religious, Christian teachers who said they deserve everything they get, let them die, put them in concentration camps until they just die off. And even our president, who happened to be Reagan at the time, he never commented about HIV/AIDS and literally the thousands and thousands and thousands of people, most of them gay men, but at that point even, heterosexuals, men and women, who had died, until he commented about Ryan White, who was the young kid who contracted AIDS and died from a transfusion. And they created the Ryan White Fund. And Reagan acknowledged that finally and said, we're gonna dedicate money to eradicate AIDS in the world. And then the following year in the budget, he actually slashed funding for AIDS research and AIDS services instead of, adding more money to it. So I know what it's like to be on the outside, to be ostracized, and to be cut away, and to feel different and less than, and to grow up with that myself. And so if you look at the number one problem facing the world, then you really come to an understanding that the underlying problem of the destruction of the environment, or the pollution of the environment, or the poverty in the world, or the inequality of economics, or the cruelty of man against man, and the discrimination that we all face, you realize that the number one common denominator is actually the lack of human development. And so for me, rather than dedicate myself as an activist for the environment, or anti-pollution, or for reading and literacy, or for democratic rights, or for economic rights, is actually then how can I commit myself to helping human beings grow up? How can I help people wake up and develop and grow as human beings? And how can we as humanity begin to take on this next evolutionary turn? And I love this quote from Albert Einstein: "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." If we are stuck in our separate selves, if we're dealing from the level of anxiety and stress and fear that created so many of our problems, we're never going to be able to solve them. We have to be able to shift at least to our enlightened selves, to our more loving and compassionate selves, or even to our unique rainbow selves, and that highest level of spiritual vibration, to be able to come up with the solutions that will make such a huge difference. So my big why, my sole purpose, is to help raise 10% of the world's consciousness to the level of embodied enlightenment. Now, just so you know, we're dancing around just over 3%, maybe inching towards 4% of the world's population is now at this stage of awareness. And most of you on this call that will listen to it right now, and that will be listening to the replay, you're dancing around that place of embodying enlightenment. You may not be there yet. You may be stuck, in the separate self, but, we're moving in that direction. And if 10% of the world's population could actually move, if we could grow up, we could wake up, we could grow up, and we could show up, 10% of the world's population, it would create a tipping point, an evolutionary tipping point that would transform all of the problems that we face today. So my big why, my sole purpose, is to help 10% of the world's population wake up. Now, for those of you that are listening, it's like, okay, God, that sounds kind of vague. We're at 7.5 billion people on the planet. 10% of that is 742 million. That happens to be about the population of modern Europe. Now, obviously, not everybody in modern Europe is tipping around embodied enlightenment, but think about all the people around the world that are working with these spiritual solutions, these spiritual techniques, to help us move to a new state. So I'm really asking you to join the movement. I call it the Rainbow Revolution. It's enlightened people running enlightening businesses, using enlightening marketing, using enlightening messaging, using these enlightenment principles to uplift humanity in every way, form, or capacity that we can. So I'm asking you to wake up, grow up, and show up. And whatever techniques, whatever practices that you're called to are perfect for you. Now, I happen to be, a teacher of Enlightened Tapping, because that's what's worked the fastest and the most direct for me. And so for those of you that had a great experience with the Enlightened Tapping during the hangout, a few days ago, fantastic. You've seen the power of it. You've seen the capacity of it. And so that's what I want to leave you with. Whatever you're called to do in your heart of hearts, in your soul of souls, it's going to be a prescription of waking up, of growing up, and showing up. You've got to wake up to your best self, whatever that means for you. You've got to grow up and to embody, body, heart, mind, and spirit, your best self. And then you've got to show up and be your best self in, at least in your home, in your family, in your community, in the world, in whatever way you're called to. Now that can mean just being the very best mother and the very best father that you're destined to be, and just to share love and presence with the people at the grocery store and the people at the office and the people at the where you have your dry cleaning done. For some of you, it means having your own tribe. It means being a yoga teacher or being a Nia teacher or teaching martial arts or having a dojo or a clinic, being a massage therapist or a facialist or a Reiki master. Whatever way you're called to have your own business or your own tribe, your own way of helping and serving and healing people, that's perfect too. And some of the people on this call are destined to have bigger tribes, to be, spiritual teachers, at a state level or a national level or an international level. And whatever your path is, that's perfect. But you still have to wake up and grow up and show up. And you've got to do the shadow work that allows you to completely embody these states of being, because your shadows will drive you crazy. Your shadows will sabotage you. They will destroy you. They'll hijack you if you don't deal with them head on. And that's where working with those voices of resistance, using the psychology of cells, voice dialogue, big mind, enlightened tapping are so incredibly helpful. Do your shadow work. So I just want to say, hey, thanks for everybody, for being here. There's still a tremendous amount of you still on the line, and I'm so grateful. If this information, that just what I shared with you, you think will help to transform your life, would you just, give me a quick shout out and a yes in the chat box? If you can sense how you need to step up body, heart, mind, and spirit to the next level of your being, please just enter something in the chat box and make a commitment, make a vow to yourself that you will do that in whatever way, form, or fashion. I'm not attached to how you do it. It's just important to me that you do it. And so that's it for our free training tonight. And we've gone into our 90 minutes. We've covered our 90 minutes, and I think we're a few minutes over. But I want it out now for those of you that are interested in going to the next level. You want to learn more about what Enlightened Tapping is and what working with me personally could be. So let me first say that here's what a couple people are saying about Enlightened Tapping. I had the privilege of working with Barbara Marx Hubbard, the author of Conscious Evolution. She's one of America's and the world's great futurists. We were talking about one of the things she talks about as Homo co-creator is actually being a co-creator with evolution. I call that the evolutionary unique self myself. But we were working in her living room, and I asked to speak to the voice of Homo co-creator, and we were tapping with it, and she jumped up and said, "Oh my God, I've been teaching about this voice for 20 years, but I've never felt it from the inside out. I've never experienced the power and strength and beauty of it from inside myself." So she went on to say that the entire world needs massive tapping if we're going to step up to this evolutionary shift that needs to happen for humanity. And then Margaret Lynch, of course, you heard her the other day saying that, it's just one of the most extraordinary experiences for her that she's ever felt or sensed in her own body and her spiritual practice, and that that there's just nobody else in the world doing work that is like this in the world. So she obviously is a huge fan. She's introduced it at her Ignite event to make sure that everyone that wanted in the morning would come. We had 80 to almost 100 people come every morning to experience the Enlightened Tapping at her event, and then they would go off and listen to Margaret through the day. And then she invites me to her platinum events with her high-paying clients to give them the experience of it, to help them to embody their best selves, not only as people, but as business people. Okay, so here is what the evolutionary program is really about, the Enlightened Tapping. The home study course, it's a deep dive study. It includes these 6 modules. The entire pyramid of consciousness, tapping with the separate self, tapping with the enlightened self, tapping with the unique self. So working with the entire pyramid of consciousness in every module, you'll get the experience of that. In the first one, we really focus on the voice of the controller. In the second module, we focus on the voice of the protector. In the third module, we focus then on the voice of the innocent child. So the first 3 modules are really, you always get the experience of your enlightened self and your unique self, but we focus with the voices of the separate self because they hold so much tension and so much stress. And the more we can loosen the tension of those voices in the separate self, the easier it is for you to shift over and over and over and over and over into the enlightened self and into your unique self. Then as we move into the 4th module, again, always tapping with the separate self, the enlightened self, the unique self, but we really focus on the Divine Father, the stillness of pure being, Buddha mind, conscious awareness, cosmic awareness. It's sort of that masculine impulse of awareness and the enlightenment there. And then the 5th module is the Divine Mother. It's working with that impulse of the feminine divine and that path of devotion and intimacy and unconditional love with all things. And then the 6th module is actually going through the 5 stages of enlightenment that I outlined for you earlier. So it's an entire module that takes you through the waking up, to surrender and submission, to disappointment and despair and frustration, and then finally breaking through into great liberation, and then hanging out in great liberation and the deep pleasure of it, and then the dark night of the soul, and then into ordinary mind is the way, as they said in Zen, or being your unique rainbow self, how you put all those pieces back together. So there's 6 modules there. Now it's 100% digital. You get the video, you get the audio of each module, and then there's a transcription workbook. It's like 247 pages or something, PDF, that is a transcription of the entire program. So all the tapping scripts are there, written out, typed out for you in the workbook. And then, as you said, you have the video and the audio. You can go back over and over again to them. So that's the basic course right there. And then here are the bonuses that I think are so important. You get 6 live calls with me to take you deeper. You get a free ticket to the Enlightened Tapping live event in Houston, which is going to be December 2015 here in Texas. You get, and this is a bonus I'm really, really excited about and proud of. It's Mix Your Own Meditation. We took the snippets of all the tapping for all the major voices of the separate self, all the major voices of the enlightened voices we tapped with, and all the voices of the unique rainbow self. We took those, just the tapping, and then we added 5 minutes of stillness, so that you can download each of these little recordings and create your own mixtape. You can create your own playlist, or you can explore whatever you're in the mood to explore. I always recommend you start with the controller, and then you go to any of the enlightened voices that you want. If you can't hang out there, you keep getting pulled to the separate self, that means there's some stress there that needs to be tapped on and worked with. You can choose any of the other voices of the enlightened self to work with, or do your own. And then always go to the end of your meditation. And the 5 minutes of silence lets you tap and then really just hang out in the energy and let the voice and the energy and the pleasure and the sensation reveal itself to you. So this is how you really create a daily practice with this, and you do it on your own. For those of you on the call today, you get a physical copy of my book, Body Brilliance, Mastering Your 5 Vital Intelligences. I will send it to you. And then you get the exclusive Enlightened Tapping Facebook community, all the people who were there in the filming of the live event that we created for the home study course. All the people who've invested in the program since then are all most of them are in the Facebook community, and you have access to that. And there's a lot of juicy questions and a lot of support and a lot of things that happen in the Facebook group. The total package is well over $1,600, but if you invest tonight, it's $197. And you can go to www.enlightenedtappingmeditation.com /yes. And let me just enter that into the chat books. Meditation.com /yes, and www.enlightenedtappingmeditation.com. Yes, there, I just posted the link there for you. If you are listening, you can go right there and look at everything that you get. Now, I want to give you my guarantee for this. Now, anybody who buys anything from my company through yourbody.com, Body Brilliance, Enlightened Tapping, you get a 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. If for some reason you're not happy, I want you to have your money back. I also commit to you that you're going to have a full enlightened experience or your money back. With the home study course. So with the modules, with the bonus calls, even if you come to the live event and you still don't have, a classic enlightened stillness of pure being, Buddha mind, samadhi, satori, nirvana, divine mother, enlightened experience, then I'll refund your money. Because that's the promise of this work. Now, when you've got 1,000 people on a hangout, you can't facilitate all of them. But I think that if anyone's on the webinar, or was anyone on the webinar that was at Ignite 2015 in March of this year, would you just enter in and just say howdy if you were? But there was a woman. It was the day that we spoke to the Divine Mother. I thought, I'm surrounded by all these women that are here for Margaret's event. This is going to be easy. Well, whoa. Actually, surprisingly, there were about 8 women in the audience of about 80 people, so about 10% that initially could not shift into the Divine Mother. But I just went one by one and worked with them. And in just a few minutes, literally, of just connecting with the controller, and the controller protector, the voice of protections, and able to dialogue a little bit, people were able to shift and let go and have an experience. But there was one woman, she was about, I don't know, the 5th or 6th woman, and the minute I asked to speak to her controller, she started hyperventilating, she started crying, you could tell she was having a whole body reaction, and I just said, look at me. Look at me. And I got her in her body. I got her back in her body. I got her back into her breath. And I said, let me speak to the controller. She was able to shift to the controller. And we dialogued for just a few minutes. And then she was able to shift right into the Divine Mother. And she was then able to stay there for the rest of the tapping. So she went from a full-blown somatic body breakdown to within 5 minutes being able to experience the Divine Mother. So most people don't have that kind of difficulty. But, we have a lot of protection. We have a lot of layers of doubting and protection. And sometimes it just takes a way to very gently and lovingly, and with the support and enthusiasm of those voices, to let go and let you experience enlightenment. And I make a commitment to you that I want that for you, and that you deserve that. And that's a promise of this course. And I will work with you personally, just to make sure, if you want that, if you want the experience. So I want you to have that. So that's my guarantee to you. Oh, also, I'm going to add, there's one more bonus that I've added, and actually it was my friend, Sheila, who suggested it to me. As we've run the home study course and as we've taught it, it's become clear that people come to me and say, Alan, I absolutely love this work when I do it with you live, when I do it with you on the calls, when I do watching the videos, when I do the tapping, even with the recorded audio meditations. I have an extraordinary experience, but I notice a resistance to doing the work. I notice a resistance. I had one lady said, I've scheduled all the calls. It's, all the bonus calls. They're on my calendar. But I notice when the time comes that day, I feel the resistance. Oh, you're too busy. I'm too busy to go. You don't need to go. It's those voices of resistance. So I'm adding a whole bonus module. I'm going to do a basic tapping with a voice of resistance, and I'm going to do a very advanced technique that I do called it's an emotional healing technique on resistance. So I'm going to videotape those both with an echo so that you have them, so that when you face your own resistance, now whether it's resistance to doing the Enlightened Tapping or whether it's resistance to doing anything that's powerful or healing or beneficial in your life, you can always use it as a resource and a tool. But this is my friend Sheila Paxton, and she talked about being in the 12-step program, and for 27 years, meditation is the 11th step. I thought through prayer and meditation for a greater understanding of the power greater than me. And she wanted to be a good 12-stepper. She wanted to be a good meditator, and she tried for 27 years of all kinds of different meditation: mindfulness, kundalini, transcendental meditation, visualization, movement, everything. She tried it. And she actually came to a business training that I did, a 3-day business training, but we always start every morning with the Enlightened Tapping. And she was just shocked. 20 minutes of the Enlightened Tapping, and she said, you took me to a place, an enlightened place that she'd never been. She transcended her monkey mind. She transcended that chatter that she lived with all of her life. So she's, of course, a proponent of the Enlightened Tapping. And you can thank her for those, the resistance modules. See, those would be great little bonus modules for you. This is my friend Joe Hirsch. I mentioned him. He said how the 5 stages of enlightenment completely changed his life. And he's the one who coined the phrase Enlightened Tapping is enlightenment at your fingertips, a mystical experience at your fingertips. So he goes on. So here we are. There are so many of you that are still on the call. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and attention. If you're interested in investing in the program and working with me closer and more deeply, you can go to enlightenedtappingmeditation.com/yes. It's also there in the chat box there for you. So what questions do you have? I know there's a lot of comments, so I'm not going to go through and try to find all the questions. So if you've got a question now, from this point on, oh yeah, several people said Robin was there. Thank you, Robin. Fabulous. Somebody just submitted a question to me and I accidentally deleted it. So if you've submitted a question or comment in the last, say, maybe 5 minutes. Would you resubmit it to me? I apologize. But if you've got a question about anything that we did with the Hangout a few days ago, any of the tapping, if you've got any comments or questions about what we covered tonight, if you've got any comments or questions about the home study course, please enter it into the chat box and I will answer them right now. I'm happy to do that. And okay, so Mary just says yes, thank you, and she wants to watch the video. So I'll make sure that when I send out the replay for this webinar, that I will make sure that everybody that signed up for this webinar also gets a link to the Google Hangout that I did. I'll tell you, it is it's the core is, again, it's another 90 minutes, maybe 100 minutes. The first 30 minutes is an interview with Margaret and myself. You're welcome to watch that if you want to. The setup for the tapping starts right at about 30 minutes, 32 minutes, something like that. And then we move right into the voices of the separate self. Now, a couple things. It may seem like it's a private session for Margaret, but what we know about tapping is what we call the borrowed benefits. So, part of this enlightened tapping process is what I call deep listening. As we shift and move into these different voices and aspects of ourselves, listen deeply to what's true for you and what these voices are revealing for you. Now, to demonstrate it, I'm doing that obviously with my friend Margaret Lynch. But then when we do the tapping, I'm using some of the unique things that she said to me, but I'm also using things that I know to sort of be universally true for each of the voices of the controller and the one who seeks the way. So definitely do the tapping, do the tapping out loud. So 30 minutes after the tapping starts, or the voice dialogue, the enlightened tapping process starts. So an hour into the video, we get to the stillness of pure being, which is the first enlightened voice. So if you will give me an hour into the process, you'll have an enlightened experience. Or if you want to move up to the 30-minute mark and you want to just start with the tapping process, commit to give me 45 minutes, because that'll move you into the Divine Mother. You'll have an enlightened experience. You will tap. So there you go. I know several people have said something about the sound, so all I can tell you is that the system's sometimes wonky. I can tell you that my microphone shows that it is indeed broadcasting like it has all along. I have been recording this via telephone as well with a different recording, so we're going to do the best, and we'll go from that. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Anybody else? Could the experience make the body have fever? Yeah. Well, one of the things that happens is you're bringing consciousness and you're bringing attention to these parts of yourself that have been unconscious. Fever is an amazing tool. Not only does your body use it to burn off, bacteria and infections that you have in your body, but I subscribe to the idea that your body also uses fever to burn off old patterns, old programming, old karma, old ways of being that no longer serve me. As a matter of fact, I was sick earlier this year. I was more sick than I've been as an adult. And I came through it after about 2.5 weeks of an incredible amount of fever and sleep and rest. And I feel like a different person. I still feel like I am a different person because that fever burned off something. And I'm just more embodied. I'm more at rest with myself. Um, yes, and again, the controller. When you start to work with these voices, incredible waves of emotion can come up. One of the things we talk about with the controller, your controller has been there probably since you were still in your mother's womb, but certainly at the very beginning of your life. And the controller works so diligently in so many areas of your life that you're not aware of, and it gets no attention or very little appreciation. Or if the self notices it all, it's usually from a place of frustration. Don't be so uptight. Don't try to control everything. Just let go. I'd have so much more fun if you weren't, controlling everything. So yes, lots and lots of emotions can come up as you start to work with these voices. But I just want to remind you that part of the inherent process of working with the separate self and the voices of the separate self is that you start to make friends and allies with your enlightened selves, your enlightened voices, and they help you be present. They help you witness it without needing to change it or be different. They allow you to um, become completely detached from, so that you don't take personally anything anymore ever, as that becomes embodied and emboned in your bones. Or for the Divine Mother, the capacity of the Divine Mother to take all of your pain, all of your grief, all of your worry, all of your fear, all of your suffering, all of the world's suffering, and completely transmute it into something golden and light and healing, and allow you to use that energy for your own healing and the healing of your tribe. So you're learning to meet and work with allies that'll help you deal with any bodily sensations, any fears, any doubts, any pain, any emotions that come up. They're there for you. So I'm wondering if does this work address deep trauma? I will say we don't address deep trauma in the home study course. I do have a degree in psychology. I'm a veteran of many, many years of therapy myself, the body work that I'm a graduate of and have worked with since 1994. I studied with an actual psychoanalyst, Robert K. Hall, and Richard Strozzi Heckler, who is also a PhD psychologist. They combined Rolfing deep tissue body work, Gestalt therapy, Aikido movement, breath work, meditation, movement, just everything you could about being present in the body and being present to all levels of trauma and healing, and recovery and enlightenment. It's all there, all there. So, people's trauma is something to be approached very carefully and respectfully. But this particular process of the enlightened tapping is an amazing way to cut through years of trauma and years of pain, and to embrace it with the power of the Divine Father and the Divine Mother, and to meet your enlightened self, and to meet your own unique rainbow self, and develop the skills of being able to hold that pain and manage and work with it skillfully, so that you learn how to manage your own trauma. And then certainly as a modality, there's tremendous ways of working with this. And when you come to the live event, or maybe even on the bonus calls, you'll hear some of the deeper, more advanced work that you can do with it. So there's that, Greg. Thank you for that great question. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. And that was Elda, who was asking about the controller and fever. So thank you very much for that. Lil just says, thanks for your generous time, and to all of us, you're absolutely welcome. You obviously can tell I'm passionate and that I love this. Hello, Bridget. You're awesome. I heard a great thing about awesome today I'm going to share with you and for everybody. So an optimist is somebody who looks at the glass and sees that it's half full, and a pessimist is someone who looks at a glass and sees that it's half empty, and an awesomist is somebody who looks at a glass and goes, damn, there's a dragon in there. So Bridget, you're an awesomist, so you're quite welcome. Let's see. This is from, who is this? Robin. I thank you for the foundation background of your work. I had taken your program but must have missed the background. I would like to forward this link to a friend who really needs this work. It is truly transformational. Robin is one of our graduates, and she wrote me a beautiful, beautiful email just the other day. She just finished the home study course about 2 weeks ago, and she's just having extraordinary breakthroughs right and left, and is on fire writing a book and writing songs and singing songs, and she is definitely living her autobiography and working very skillfully with the voices of her of the matrix and her previous programming to step and embody her rainbow self. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, let's see. Anybody else have a comment? What is the link to the Enlightened Tapping meditation that was done a few days ago? I'm going to have to look it up, but I promise, Lil, that when I send out the replay tomorrow for this webinar, I will also include the link to the Enlightened Tapping demonstration. Because I wanted to do the demo first so that you see what it really works and that you can have an experience, whether you've ever meditated before in life, whether you ever had an enlightened experience before. I wanted you to have that, and then this webinar is really to show you the nuts and bolts behind why it works and how it works and the pathway of evolutionary enlightenment, and how enlightened tapping will really help you become your absolute best self, your most magnificent self. So I'll make sure that's in the email. So there you go. Great. You're very welcome. Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Susan. Oh, maybe it's a previous question. Let me. Well, certainly a conversation like this and enlightened tapping, whether you invest in the program or not, it's absolutely a wonderful way to rekindle your practice. Just to light the fire. So. Thank you. Els says, I appreciate your generosity, openness, and honesty too. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Greg says, thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, great. Let's see, this is from Susan. Love this. You're a wonderful and engaging teacher. I am inspired to return and rekindle my practice. I'm a Reiki master and have drifted away in recent years. I feel energized to get back to it. Absolutely. Well, then, that's a wonderful, wonderful gift that you're giving yourself and all of us. So thank you. So rekindle, fabulous. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I think that's all the questions. And let's see. Okay. Okay, let's see. Mary Pat Carrero said, yes, thank you, Alan. Love your Enlightened Tapping. It has already made a big difference in just the past few days. She just invested in the program 2 days ago, and she said it's already made a huge difference in her life, and she's so grateful. So thank you. And we'll have the bonus questions coming up. So, okay. Thank you for an amazing and enlightened training. You're very welcome, Lil. Absolutely. Um, let's all keep on keeping on. Show up who we really are. Absolutely. Okay. I love the tapping and love the new take on the gratitude journal. You're very, very welcome, Samantha. Absolutely fabulous. Yeah, and on that, a lot of people talk about the importance of writing down at the end of the day 3 good things. But the secret sauce is actually going back and remembering the sensations in your body at the time, and remembering the sensations of those emotions and why you felt the way that you did, and then setting that intention. Make this a part of my being. That alone, intention is such a powerful tool. So, okay, great. All right. Well, I think that's everybody that um, has submitted a question. So I just want to thank for those of you that are still on the webinar. It's been a couple hours, so thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, your attention. If you're interested in this work, you want to take it deeper, enlightenedtappingmeditation.com/yes. You have until Monday night, the 25th, I think it is, to make a decision and invest in the program at this price point of $197. Usually I close the doors for the training so that the entire group of people can go through the 6 modules and enjoy the 6 calls together, because there is resistance that comes up for sure, and there is power and there's beauty in creating a community that goes through together. So I really think that's very powerful and profound. When the cart opens, when the doors open for the training again, it'll be a while before we do another round of support calls, and it will definitely, the price will be $497. That's sort of the everyday price, unless I run a special like this for a group. So anyway, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate you being here with us. I honor each of you and where you are in your journey to waking up to growing up to showing up as your rainbow self, your enlightened self, your fully awake, fully aware, fully embodied self. It's a privilege